Hello and welcome to the latest episode of In Conversation with Ryder, the Chronicle Live's chief Newcastle United writer. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, and we're going to talk all about Newcastle's final game of the 2023-24 campaign. Newcastle head down to Brentford on Sunday with the hope of securing European football. It is now out of their hands ever so slightly, but we'll get into that in a moment. Lee has had the pleasure of being in Eddie Howe's final pre-match press conference of the season. We're going to get into what Eddie Howe had to say and the kind of feeling from the manager and Lee's take on the task ahead on Sunday. Lee, welcome back to the pod. You well?
Yeah, good, thank you. Looking forward to the last game of the season and hopefully they can finish on a high.
Fingers crossed. It does seem like this season has gone on forever, and in due course, me and Lee will be doing some sort of season review once the campaign has come to a close. But as I said, first off, it is all about Brentford on Sunday. Newcastle United currently in 7th. They just need to match what Manchester United do against Brighton to finish above Manchester United. But if they finish 7th, they are relying on Man City to beat Man United in the FA Cup. And if Man City do that, then the 7th place becomes a conference place ticket. Newcastle can still finish 6th, but they would be relying on Chelsea, informed Chelsea, to lose on Sunday. And Newcastle, of course, would still need to beat Brentford. We'll talk a bit more about the permutations in a minute, Lee, but you were in the press conference today with Eddie Howe. How was the manager? Did you get a sense that he was maybe feeling a bit nervous about Sunday, or was he cool, calm, and collective as always?
I don't think nervous is probably the way I would describe it. I'd say that probably there's a little bit of sort of uncertainty in the air overall, not just on what's going to happen on Sunday, but also what's going to happen in the summer. Obviously, the sporting director still needs to be confirmed yet. Transfers. How much money is he going to get to spend? Is he going to be able to hold on to certain players? So I think that's all starting to creep in now. And I think it's kind of coming to a head. You've also got this trip to Australia next week, which, we've had sort of mixed signals on from the players because it's normally the time where they're jetting off for their summer holidays. So it's going to be a really intriguing sort of post-season, if you like, and they kind of go under the microscope a little bit from that point of view. So I think all of that was sort of weighing on his shoulders a little bit today at the press conference, and it was there for all to see.
And I guess when you're talking about summer transfer plans and players that could be coming in, could be leaving, first and foremost, the first question any potential arrivals will ask is, well, are we going to be playing European football next season? So not knowing whether that's the case and not knowing for another week, even if they finish 7th, if that's the case, that is going to add a kind of a delay to proceedings. But on Sunday's game specifically, Lee, how do you think Eddie Howe's looking at it? I mean, it's quite simple, isn't it? They've got to win, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think there is almost like a little bit of a hangover from the Manchester United game. I fully went into that game expecting Newcastle to win the game. I'm not going to lie, because the way Manchester United have been, the way Newcastle have been, and I think tactically the way Newcastle set up, they kind of sat back a little bit. I know they created chances, good chances, but they kind of sat back and almost gave Manchester United a free hit at them. And Man United were in the mood to take it because they were desperate to take it. And I think there's a lot of regret in the camp over that game. And I hope that it can only motivate Newcastle at Brentford. And maybe, this isn't the time for them to... We've seen it a couple of times where Newcastle have kind of sat back a little bit in games and tried to play on the counter-attack, counter-pressing, all that sort of stuff. But realistically, Newcastle must do what they know they're capable of doing, which is they can go almost on the front foot and win the game and take the game to Brentford. I think they've got to do it in this game.
Yeah, and you were right about the Manchester United game. I was like you. I was fully confident Newcastle United would beat Manchester United, and they should have done. As you say, Man United's not going well at all. And yeah, the 3 points went to those in the Northwest. It is a difficult game, though, isn't it? On Sunday, Brentford haven't got anything to play for, but then neither did Brighton, and Newcastle were held to a point there against Brighton. What are you expecting from Brentford, do you think, on Sunday?
Well, I think Newcastle players know that they've got to go out and they've got to finish on a high, and they've pretty much had an open invitation to get in the Europa League the last few weeks. The way the season's unfolded, even a couple of slip-ups from Newcastle against Everton and Crystal Palace away, the door was still wide open for them. So basically, the option was there for them to get in the Europa League the last couple of games. They didn't manage it against Brighton. It was a frustrating day. It was very disappointing against Manchester United the other night. They've now got one last sort of chance at it. Obviously, Chelsea have found a way. Chelsea have shown that kind of mentality that we are big-time players. We can't get the European place. And they put the situation in their own hands. The Europa Conference League would be a consolation for Newcastle, but it will be a consolation worth having. So they've got to go in this Brentford game and make a statement of intent. They've got to show that, look, we can be one of the big boys. Let's go and do it against Brentford. Let's get the place secured, at least win the game. Even if we do have to wait another week, it's a typical Newcastle United situation. Even if we do have to wait another week for that European place to be confirmed, we'll probably take that now, given what's happened. So, yeah, for me, I'd be delighted if they can finish 7th, and then we'll see what happens. We'll take that scenario. Anything more, brilliant.
Howe said in today's press conference that it's a big last day for us. There's no denying that. We go into the game knowing we have to do our part, which is win the game. That is no mean feat. It's going to be a tough game. And then we're in the hands of other clubs. The players are determined to finish on a high. We could have got more from the past 2 games, and we didn't. Do you think the fact, Lee, that it was in their hands, they were looking like favourites to secure 6th place? There was talk, and I was guilty of it, of maybe even catching Spurs, and now they are relying on other teams to potentially not even finish in a European spot. Does that hurt more? Because you look at the season and you say, well, look, it's just to be in this conversation is actually quite something, given the injuries and the points total they had to make up at the turn of the year. But then others might say, well, yes, you are right. But you then look at the last few weeks when they had points on Chelsea, when they had points on Manchester United. If you're going to praise one element, you've then maybe got to look at the other element and say, we're a little bit disappointed that we find ourselves in this position.
Yeah, I take all that on board. And for me, it's almost like we're going to stumble over the finish line. I don't know if you've seen the movie Herbie about the car when it goes over the finish line and it breaks in half and it somehow just gets over the line. That's what Newcastle have got to do in this game. They've just somehow got to get over the line. Whether they do it with players limping and stumbling, they've just got to get over the line now. And I just hope that they can do it. They deserve a place in Europe, but the old adage is the league table doesn't lie. If it ends in Newcastle at 8th, that's as good as they've been. And it doesn't matter if they were unlucky in the last few games, that's where they'll deserve to finish. So I take all the injuries on board. I take all the other things that have gone on, the Sandro Tonali ban, Dan Ashworth deciding to go to Manchester United, all the disruption. Yeah, I take it. But performance-wise on the pitch, if you finish 8th, that's what you deserve. So hopefully they can get something better than that. But it's going to be tough. Brentford will be looking to sign off on a high. It's going to be a tough old afternoon down there.
It certainly is. And Brentford have picked up of late. I think they've only lost one of their last 6 home games. Admittedly, they've only won one as well. They've drawn the other ones. But, they secured their Premier League status. And like you say, will be looking to send their fans into the summer very, very happy. And I think, though, from a Newcastle point of view, there will be a bit of a frustration that they had control of this and now they don't. And again, Eddie Howe speaking this morning, talking about the season as a whole. And he said, we'll look back with a tinge of what could have been in many aspects, whether you talk about the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup, the Champions League, the Premier League. I think we've done okay. I think we've done well, but it could have been so different. It could have been even more memorable. So that will be a frustration that will live with me. He's not sitting there, is he, Lee, and reading off these excuses, reading off the 10 players that there was in one moment that were first team players not available. He's not listing Tonali's ban as an excuse. He's aware of it, but he's also looking at it and thinking, the things we could control, we maybe haven't done as good as we should have done.
No, and I think throughout the whole season, I don't think Eddie Howe has been a guy for excuses. We've seen it down the years, and managers even making excuses before the season's kicked off about resources and stuff. I don't think Eddie Howe has done that. He's tried to do it his way, and that's got Newcastle to a certain spot. If he was sitting here in sixth place now, you'd say that was a good way of doing it. And if they get into Europe and they finish seventh, then they could still finish sixth as well, of course. Then he's had a great season. I think it would be a sort of slightly negative finish if they finish eighth, and then you could bring in mitigating circumstances. But I haven't found Eddie Howe as an excuse maker all season. He's very upfront and honest at Old Trafford the other night in the press room there, because ultimately the whole media was there for that game because it was such a big game. The national media were all there. He didn't make excuses. He said we didn't defend well. We had opportunities to win it and we haven't taken it. And he was disappointed. He didn't even bring injuries into it. So that's been Eddie Howe to a T this season. I think he's dealt with the media very well. There's probably been times where he's been under more pressure than he is now, certainly when they went out of Europe and had that mid-season slump, and there was a lot of questions being asked of him. But I think he's answered most of them. I just think he personally probably deserves that European place for all his efforts and all the time he's put into it, because he is very meticulous.
Yeah, he certainly is. We'll just look at some players who could return for Sunday. I guess Callum Wilson is the big one. He's been missing the last couple of games through illness and maybe a bit of tightness of something or other. What did Eddie Howe have to say about him? And if he does come back on Sunday, how big of a boost will that be for Newcastle?
Yeah, this is something I asked Eddie about this morning. He said that he hopes Callum Wilson comes back. And he said, we've missed him because he brings that personality to the dressing room and he brings that experience to the pitch. And they're two big things that you can't buy experience, because someone who's been through the motions before will always have a greater sort of picture of what could happen, what could go wrong. And I think Callum Wilson this season, when he's been on the pitch, he's delivered. He's still got double figures this season. And I feel sorry for him in a way, because, he's got all these great players around him and he could benefit from the service from those players. And he hasn't been able to do it because of certain little niggles, certain little setbacks. But hopefully he's back at the weekend and he can put in one of his best games. And if he can, good luck to him getting in the England squad for the Euros. That'd be fully deserved in a 26-man squad and someone who can do a job at international level. And for me, I'm a Callum Wilson fan. I think when he's on the pitch with that number 9 on his back, you've got a great chance of winning the game because he's going to get goals. So let's hope he's fit and he can finish the season on a high. Anthony Gordon as well, obviously got that nasty knock. He got his sock ripped to pieces. We've all had time to look at that now. It's a clear penalty. Surprise, surprise. Newcastle don't get a penalty at Old Trafford. Another, hard luck story, but there you go. But having Anthony Gordon back, having Wilson back, let's try and get minutes from Isak as well, and try to just win the game. And if you've got them 3 on the pitch, you've got every chance.
What's the message going to be, do you think, from Eddie Howe? Obviously, he said to the press today, we've got to win. But when he's in that dressing room 10 minutes before everyone goes out onto the pitch, what's the message? Is it we go one final time? Some of them players that are involved might not be here next season. So I guess those are going to want to end their time at Newcastle on a high. But Eddie Howe will just be saying one final time. These fans have followed you up and down and across Europe as well. So send them into the summer, Javi.
Yeah, I think one way that he might approach it is he might look at it and say, look, if I'd have offered you the chance to get into Europe on the final game of the season, would you have taken that one last shot of glory? And I think most of the players would put their hands up and say, yeah, actually we would. So forget the circumstances, forget the fact they've stumbled in the last couple of games. If they'd been offered this in March when they were 10th, one last 90 minutes to get into Europe, book your place, then I think to a man they would have taken it. So let's hope they see it that way, and there's not a subdued feel about it. And the other results could go their way, they could go against them, but it's still in their control to finish 7th. So let's hope they can do it.
Yeah, and we have to talk about the away record, because obviously Newcastle are away at Brentford, and it is abysmal. And I've just been having a look there, actually. I just picked like a random season that didn't go too well for Newcastle United just to compare. And I picked the 97-98 season. You probably remember well, Newcastle finished 13th. They lost 10 on the road that season. And this season, Newcastle United have lost 11 on the road, won 5, drawn 2. So I just was wanting to show that little bit of a comparison to one of the, shall we say, less memorable seasons in the last 30-odd years. But on the away record, Lee, why is it so bad? Because last season they were absolutely superb on the road. So what's changed?
I think expectation has changed a little bit. Other teams do seem to have worked Newcastle out a little bit. Look at a game like Luton Town away. I was down there. It was December the 23rd. It was an early Christmas. The place was absolutely bouncing. It was like Luton Town's Champions League final facing Newcastle. And they were up for it. The atmosphere was incredible, given it was only supposed to be a league game. And, everything kind of went against Newcastle on the day. It was a bit like it was almost an FA Cup third round game in some ways. And it went against Newcastle. And they've had a few of them. But I suppose it's something they've got to look at next season. Mentality is a word that's been bandied around the last couple of days. But you can't escape that kind of mid-season slump where they went to Everton and they got a bad defeat at Everton. Yeah, went to Tottenham, they had a bad defeat there. Those really wounded Newcastle, those games, and set a certain tone. But, I mean, look, we're also, for all we're saying, it's the worst one since 97, 98. You look at... they went to Sheffield United. I know they're rock bottom, but that was a memorable day, winning 8-0 away from home. You don't get that very often. They went to Burnley the other day and got a great win. So there has been plus points as well, and thankfully the home form has saved the season in a way, and hopefully that can be the passport into Europe.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it will be when you look back on this season and work out how they managed to get into Europe, if indeed they do. And if they do, Lee, how would you sum up this season? Because obviously we had the joys of the Champions League and beating PSG at St James's Park, and it was a welcome return of Europe's elite competition. And you've mentioned some, results on the road there. The Sheffield United one sticks out more than most, and we've had decent runs in the cups as well, ending in disappointing fashion. But above all else, getting into Europe for next season, it's a massive achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think, given what's happened, I mean, just sort of briefly look, going over the season, there's been some big highlights, let's be honest. I mean, beating PSG 4-1 at home was amazing. They've beaten Manchester United and Arsenal at home. They're two big results. They beat Manchester City in the Carabao Cup. They went to Sunderland. We had a great day there, winning in the derby. So there's been a lot of highlights, a lot of takeaways. Going to San Siro, even going to PSG, as disappointing as the result was in the end. Still got a draw, but it was still disappointing. And seeing the fans take over Europe again has been a great sort of souvenir of this season. And now they've got the chance to do it again. Now they've got the chance to take the fans abroad again next season. And look, if they can just scrape in the Europa Conference League, they've got a chance of winning it next season. They've got a chance of another trophy. So that would be huge. So I think all said and done, let's try and get that European spot. Then the players can dust themselves down. Long summer ahead, and hopefully next season come back stronger with a few new signings as well.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Well, Lee will be down at Brentford on Sunday, bringing you the final game of the season for Newcastle United. We will be bringing you live coverage through our dedicated match day live blog. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to the Everything is Black and White podcast. For myself and Lee, we'll see you guys next